Welcome everyone to the Preschool Mindfulness Summit. I'm really happy to introduce you to Jenny Mills. She's coming to us from the US today, from New Jersey, and she is the founder of Roots and Wings organization that goes into schools and brings mindfulness programs to teachers, families, and the actual students in schools. And she works with K-12 and has a research-based program that she uses called Everyday Mindfulness for Schools. That's working really well. And her title today is Mindfulness for Teachers, Putting Your Own Oxygen Masks On First, which I love that analogy. And I think, well, thank you, first of all, Jenny, for joining us.
Thank you, Helen, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. And this is a huge issue, I feel, in globally, with teachers feeling extremely stressed. I read somewhere the other day, they did some study, and it's the second highest stressful job after being a paramedic. And I mean, there's such high dropout rates and things. So something needs to change, doesn't it? And we need to have some kind of skills. So tell us a little bit about, we're seeing now all these mindfulness programs for students, and lots of them are coming in and they're doing well and things, but why is it so important that we develop a practice for teachers or for parents?
Yeah, so to comment on what you were saying, in the United States, about 50% of teachers leave within the first 5 years. And they cite feeling completely burned out and overwhelmed, and even sometimes demoralized, where they're being asked to do things that they actually don't believe in, that they know kind of goes against good teaching practice. So what's happening really in the United States is that we have a lot of state mandates coming down from above, where teachers are expected to be teaching to the test. They have ever increasing workloads and still the same amount of time to complete their job. And teachers are just feeling completely overwhelmed by this, not to mention the fact that they are being evaluated based on how the students perform on certain tests. So imagine, your worth as a teacher being kind of calculated by how well your students are performing. And I just think that we've really come pretty far away from educating the whole child and allowing teachers the autonomy to do the job that they know how to do. So regarding bringing mindfulness to teachers, as you said, we're seeing a lot of really wonderful programs for students and, really trying to bring some practices to our young people. However, our teachers really need the practices first. I really strongly believe, being a former classroom teacher myself, that you really can't teach what you don't own, what you don't really know and have experienced, especially with something like mindfulness. It's not like teaching phonics, where you might open up a workbook and be able to read a scripted lesson. Mindfulness is something that you really have to embody in order for you to be able to have the skills to teach it. So I think that to answer your question, two things really come up. And one is that teachers need to have experience with the practice and really hone that in whatever way that makes sense for them before bringing it to their students. And also, there are such great benefits of having a teacher with a mindfulness practice. We know that even just from the research that having a teacher with a mindfulness practice, we know that there can be academic and behavioral gains for the student. So think about that, right? We're not even teaching our students anything regarding mindfulness. We're just giving the practices to the teacher. And that has a huge effect on classroom culture. Yeah, so I think that there's just so much there that is of value for our educators, and we need to kind of take better care of them. They're on the front lines.
Yeah, definitely. And what about we hear a lot about teacher burnout and things that we've just mentioned. So how specifically can mindfulness help a teacher to kind of prevent them to getting to that stage?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the things that mindfulness can help with, and in the research that I'm involved in with UPenn, we're finding that just 8 classes of mindfulness can help teachers with reducing their stress around time management. So one of the things that happens to teachers, and really I think all of us, is that we feel like there's not enough time in the day to get things done, right? We have this ever-growing to-do list and feeling like at the end of the day, if I could just have 4 or 5 more hours to get these things done. And one of the benefits of mindfulness is that it teaches us how to actually live and be in our moments, to really kind of drop into those moments, to focus on what we're doing, keep our focus there, and allow ourselves to really inhabit the time that we have. It makes us more efficient. So one of the things that has been an interesting finding from our research with UPenn is that teachers feel a decreased sense of time stress. And this is really significant because, as I said, you know, they have so many things on their plate. So to feel we're not giving them any more minutes in a day, but just by doing a few minutes of mindfulness practice every day and incorporating some of these techniques, they're feeling less stress around time management. Another way that it helps with burnout reduction is that it's helping them to have less work-related stress and less secondary traumatic stress. And what that means is that as educators, we often go home thinking about all of the problems that we have with our students, right? Our kids are coming in, really these changing demographics. We have children who have experienced trauma and have a lot of things going on in their backgrounds, and we take that home with us. We take it, you know, we kind of like worry about those children. So mindfulness allows us to have a little bit of objectivity and a little bit of space between kind of ourselves and our consciousness, our thoughts, and sort of having compassion for that situation, but not allowing it to completely overwhelm us. So those are just a couple of the kind of the scales that we're using to look at what parts of mindfulness practice are really helping with burnout prevention.
Yeah, that's so important. Everything that you said and you mentioned. So how many minutes or how much, you know, people are, I know this is a question that comes up all the time. Like, first of all, where can I fit it in? How can I do it? But like, how long, teachers want to know how long, you know, what's the minimum they can do to see some kind of benefit?
Yeah, so this is such a great question because so many people ask this, like as if there's this kind of magic number out there of how much mindfulness do I actually have to do, right?
Yeah.
So what I say to that, first of all, is if my teachers who commit to practicing for like anywhere from about 7 to 12 minutes a day at the minimum. I mean, and many of them do more than that. They might do that twice a day when they really kind of get into a habit. But starting out, I really start my teachers out with a very, very manageable amount of time because they feel so much time pressure that if I say, oh, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with 30 minutes a day. It's a non-starter. So I start my teachers out with like a 7-minute practice, just a 7-minute basic practice as far as formal practice goes. And that seems to be manageable, right? And then once they get into it, just like going to the gym, right? Once you start feeling the benefits of the practice, then you almost kind of want to do it more. So just to kind of get their foot in the door, these individuals who have never practiced mindfulness, who feel like they're running, many of which have young children, their days are just so jam-packed that setting aside maybe 7 to 12 minutes a day to start is really kind of where we begin with formal practice. Now, I say formal practice because a large part of the Everyday Mindfulness for Schools training is informal practicing, which is really those moments that we find in our day to pause, notice, and name what's happening, right? So as an educator, you're stuck in this classroom with, 20, 25 children in this emotionally reactive place, trapped, unable to go anywhere. You can't eat when you want to eat. You can't go to the bathroom, right? There's just this feeling of kind of being stuck in this space together. And so I teach my teachers to find those moments to practice that sacred art of the pause, right? To just kind of pause, check in with the body, the thoughts, the sensations, right? The emotional landscape, and then to make a choice where they can kind of react where they can respond versus react without thinking. And I think that in the feedback I've gotten from the class, this is one of the most valuable things that teachers learn, is that they can find a moment to breathe and to make a choice rather than going into reactive mode in the course of their day.
Yeah, I love that, because I really believe that as well. Those little moments where you can just, take a breath or just, recognize what's going on in your body are so important. And I think that's one of the things maybe that prevents people from getting started, is they think they have to have this big 30-minute practice and take a course and read books and to begin. But so I really like what you said. So we see more and more teachers kind of latching on to mindfulness practice. Why do you think that is?
So I think that teachers are really hungry for like almost an anchor or a buoy to kind of get them through the storm. And so when I first started doing this, 8 years ago or so, a lot of people had no idea what mindfulness was. And now it's just become much more mainstream in the States, where people are seeing, large corporations like Target and Google and Aetna kind of practicing, the professional sports teams, like the Seattle Seahawks and the Lakers. People are starting to incorporate mindfulness practice. And so I think that part of why we're seeing teachers interested is because the stigma has dropped a little bit. Not totally, but I think that there's more of an understanding that this is a secular practice. And also, I think that it's almost like I was saying, using this, going to the gym analogy, is that when they start to practice it and to feel how their mindfulness practice can be almost like a container for their experience as a teacher, then there's this desire to kind of come back to it and to kind of, return to the practice. A lot of us in the field who are working with teachers, like Patricia Jennings, is saying is giving this message very clearly, that in order to teach mindfulness, we really need to have our own practice. And I think that teachers are starting to come around to this understanding that, I can open up a curriculum out of the box and kind of read through and kind of pull it in piecemeal to give to my students, but that feels very disjointed, right? It's almost like, oh, it's mindfulness time now, and then, okay, now it's math, right?
Forget about that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that, that's where we are in the field, is kind of trying to figure out what is the best way to bring this in, and really there is no best way. However, I strongly believe in giving the teacher, the classroom teacher, this set of skills to really embody this practice, because they learn so much from how we're modeling and what we do and how we manage frustration in front of the entire class of students.
Yeah, definitely. They're always watching. And I think it's so true. I read a study the other day about, a teacher coming in that had was very anxious and upset, and stress levels that they did in Vancouver. And then they had tested the students, and their cortisol levels had gone up as well. So it really, we can just see it with our own eyes, right? Somebody comes in the room all agitated, and that kind of emotion is easy to be picked up by others. So
it's contagious.
Yeah, it's contagious. Exactly. So tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the interesting things that you found in the research that supports teachers' practice of mindfulness.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things besides the piece on their changing relationship with time is that we found that on the quantitative scales, we use the Maslach burnout inventory, and we also use the teacher stress inventory as two of the measures. So we found in these scales, and they all have these kind of subscales, that the teachers have a decreased reactivity to their inner experience. So I found that really interesting, that in just having them practice for this short amount of time formally, but then peppering in those informal practices, that they were able to learn how to have less reactivity to their thoughts, that they were able to learn how to become observers of the thoughts, right? The worry or the rumination or the constant, rehearsal of what happened in that staff meeting or what happened in that IEP meeting. They were able to kind of stop and watch those thoughts without that reactiveness. Yeah. And that really was interesting to me because, that's, to me, I think that's a pretty high level of mindfulness to achieve, to be able to kind of be the observer of your thoughts and not get tangled up in them. So I was impressed by that. And, really, I just think this is the magic of mindfulness, that this little practice of kind of what looks like doing nothing is really doing something important.
I love that magic of mindfulness. Yeah, it's so true. I think it's personally, it's been really helpful, and I've just seen it help so many people. And it's what do they say? It's simple, it's easy, but it's not easy, right? You have to kind of go through the layers. So if you have a teacher who's really interested and they want to bring this kind of practice into their schools, how would you suggest they go about that?
That's a great question, and I get this a lot. A lot of teachers are getting excited right now about this practice, and they get kind of stuck about what do I do first, or how would I approach this? So the most important thing would be to first have a dialogue with your administrators, with your guidance counselors about bringing mindfulness into the classroom, because you really don't want to do anything, even though you're excited about it. You don't want to kind of do anything without an understanding from everyone in the community. And there's so many layers in education, right? Of kind of the parent community and the administration community and your peers. You want to really have everyone on board with what you're going to be introducing and how you're going to be talking about mindfulness. So when someone contacts me and says, hey, I came to one of your sessions, I came to one of your talks, and I really love this, how would I go about bringing mindfulness into my classroom? I start out with just giving them some information, some articles that really explain how mindfulness is being used in education, how it is not a religious practice, and some of the benefits that we're seeing for students and teachers to kind of open up that dialogue. What happens as teachers is we kind of cling on to something and we get really excited about it, and then we sometimes kind of go a little bit too far into it, and then we're like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I shouldn't have done it that way, right? And it's really out of a good place. It's just that with something like this, we want to be really careful about the way that we're talking about mindfulness and the way that we're introducing it. So I would say the first step would be to, one, gather some information from the research and what's currently out there about how mindfulness practices are being used for teachers and students to enhance the learning environment. And two, develop your own practice. Absolutely, hands down, the best thing you could do for your students is to just start with a small practice for yourself. And you'd be surprised how far that can go.
Yeah, definitely. So, and what are some of the barriers maybe to bringing mindfulness into the schools?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So some of the things that we've kind of run up against is as we know, teachers need mindfulness because they've been asked to do so many things, that one of the barriers is a time barrier and an initiative barrier, that every year teachers are faced with more and more initiatives that they're starting, new curricula for science, and different amounts of minutes that they have to be spending in different parts of their day. It's really just getting squeezed smaller and smaller. And so one of the barriers is teachers or schools feeling like this is just another fad, or this is just another thing that's kind of coming at me that is kind of like the hot buzzword in education right now. That's why kind of when I introduce this to a school, I talk about mindfulness more of as a container for all of that, right? It's like the thing that can hold all of that stuff, the soup of the classroom, your role in the school, your role with the parents, your communication with your administrators. It's really the thing that anchors you while all of that other stuff is happening. So one of the barriers really is this time restraint barrier. Another barrier is, like I said, this feeling of mindfulness being brought in by teachers that aren't really sure of how to do it. And so sometimes it getting a little bit of a bad name, right? We've seen some press lately in the United States where there have been some pushback from parent groups about their children coming home and telling parents that they were meditating or they were practicing Buddhism in the classroom. And that is not flying, and that will not fly in education. So again, I think it's all coming from a good place, but we need to be very careful and very mindful of the way that we're talking about mindfulness for students and the benefits of this as a self-regulation tool, as a tool to help build classroom community and increase empathy and self-awareness.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen some of that press, and I think it's something we have to constantly go through as program creators and people sharing to make sure that everything that we present is in a secular way of wording, the way that it should be in an educational setting. So thank you for bringing that up. So let's talk a little bit now about the actual preschoolers, since this is the Preschool Mindfulness Summit. So can you maybe give us some practical ideas about parents or teachers that want to bring mindfulness into the classroom?
Absolutely.
Or the home.
So I have a 3-year-old, so I get to do a lot of really fun preschool mindfulness practices with her. And one of the ones that she really likes when we're lying in bed at night is to do a dragon breath practice. And so there's a lot of different, I'm sure as you're talking to all of these individuals, there's a lot of different breath practices that we have, right? Like there's hot chocolate breaths, and there's the Superman breath, and there's all these things. However, if we don't talk to these children about their attention, then it's kind of lost on them what's happening. So we always talk to our daughter and to our preschoolers about their attention's like a flashlight in their brain, okay? And they're in charge of where they point that flashlight, all right? So when we're doing a breath practice, like, my daughter likes this dragon breath practice where we lay in bed and we take a nice deep breath in, we put our hands on our belly and we fill it up with air, and then we breathe out like a dragon, like, right? We talk about, we do like maybe 3 of those just to kind of calm her down. We always talk about how we want to bring our flashlight of attention to feeling our breath in our body. So we kind of like put our hands on that belly and we breathe in and we breathe out and we really focus our attention there. And then whenever we're finished with the dragon breath or any other breath practices, we say, what did your flashlight of attention notice, right? Because otherwise it kind of feels like a game to the kids, or it doesn't seem connected to what we're really trying to teach. And what we're really trying to teach is that your attention is something that you are in control of, and that you can place this attention wherever you want to place it. That's really the crux of mindfulness, is kind of having the ability to manage your attention. It underlies the ability to learn, to think, to interact with one another, to understand your own emotions and others' emotions. So I think that that piece is really important. I mean, we can all come up with these really fun breath practices for little ones, but if we don't kind of connect that to what's happening and what did you notice, then we're losing a piece that's really important.
I love that. Great. The flashlight, that's a really good way to get kids to visualize what's happening. So maybe you could share a few more practical things to do.
Yeah. So another one that we do in bed, because I have a little one who has trouble calming down her mind, is we do like a stuffed animal breathing, a stuffy breathing, where we lay down on the bed and we place a stuffed animal on the belly and we take some big, deep belly breaths and we kind of rock that stuffed animal up and down. In the classroom, some really great ones. One of the things that we do is we choose an object in the classroom, and then whenever we pass by that object as we're walking around the classroom, we kind of stop, we put our finger on it, and we take a nice deep belly breath, a mindful breath. So to start out, you might use the classroom door, right? Like when the students are entering or leaving the door, you might put like a little a picture of something that means mindfulness to your classroom. Maybe you've read a book, or you have a little dot or a heart or a peace sign or whatever it is that you want to use. They kind of place a finger on it. As they pass it, they place their other hand on their belly and they take a nice breath. And then it's kind of a game because you can move it around, right? So if you have this sticker somewhere in your classroom, maybe on the door, maybe tomorrow it's on the blackboard, or the next day it's by the pencil sharpener. So it's almost like a game of trying to see when you come into the room, where is it today? But it's a reminder to just take a moment, to take a pause, to hit that pause button, even for our littlest children, because like you said, they take on the stress of the adults around them, whether that be their parents or their teacher, and they need a minute to kind of take that deeper breath to activate that rest and digest system in the body, that parasympathetic nervous system, so that they're able to learn.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing all those great ideas for teachers, and then some ideas that we can actually use with our preschool children as well. I really thank you for coming on the summit and being so open and giving us so much information.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really wonderful to be a part of the group.
Okay. And you can find more information about Roots and Wings online if you click the speaker bio below. And then there's a freebie. Jenny, did you just want to tell them what's on that resource that you've given out?
Yeah, so I've attached what's called a counting breaths practice. So the instructions are on the left-hand side of the page, and on the right-hand side, the student is guided through just breathing in and breathing out as they trace around the circles. Now, the preschoolers obviously cannot read, so you will just need to read the directions to yourself, and then you can even just fold the paper in half as they kind of go from 1 to 10. You can also just do this without the paper once you understand how it works. You can have them do their counting breaths practice, that breathing in and breathing out around the circle, in a sand table or on a cookie tray with shaving cream, to kind of bring in the sensory piece to it. They can do it in the air, standing up as like a large gross motor activity. So there's lots of different ways to kind of modify it and make it work for you. And for those of you who have older students, you can just kind of use this sheet, laminate it, and then have them kind of use it as needed.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Jenny, and thanks again for coming on the summit.
Thank you.